funding for this video series is generously provided by the University of Idaho Extension's Innovative Project Award. Welcome! This is the first video in the video series on Understanding International Trade, the Basic Ideas. Episode 3. What is a trade deficit? In this video, we will look at an accounting issue. What is the balance of payments among countries? We often hear the term trade deficit in the news, but what exactly is a trade deficit? Is a trade deficit good or bad? To explain, let's check in with Joe Vandal again on his trade mission to Mars. In the last episode, Joe and the Martians made a trade deal. Joe sells potato chips to Martians, and the Martians give memory chips to Joe in return. So far, trade exchange is balanced, meaning for Joe, the value of potato chips he exports is exactly the value of memory chips he imports. The trade exchange is also balanced for the Martians. The only way trade can be imbalanced is when one party wants the goods and services today but pay for it later. For example, let's say the Martians want more potato chips from Joe today and promise to pay for them with memory chips later. In this example, the Martians will incur a trade deficit today, meaning their value of imports is greater than the value of exports. But why would Joe agree to such a deal? The only possibility is that the Martians will pay it back later with some additional interest. For the Martians to incur this trade deficit, Joe must be willing to invest in them. He must consider this a good investment. Otherwise, he wouldn't agree to it. What do we mean by a good investment? Number one, Joe must make sure that Martians will be able to repay the debt. Number two, Joe must be satisfied with the interest he will receive later. In the introduction video in this series, we ask the question, true or false, our country is in a tremendous amount of trade deficit that isn't a good thing. The short answer is false. If the U.S. has a large trade deficit, it means that other countries consider the U.S. a good destination for investments. Whether it is good or bad depends on how the U.S. is using that investment. If it is being used wisely, and if we can generate good returns on the investment, then the trade deficit is not necessarily bad. In a sense, the way to look at trade deficit is not very different from a person in debt. And debt is not necessarily a bad thing. It helps people to buy a house, farming equipment, etc. It could be bad if the benefit we get from a loan is lower than the interest we must pay on the loan. For a farmer, without a loan to buy farm equipment, the farmer would not be able to make a living and keep the farm. But in order to pay off the loan, the farmer needs to make a profit greater than the loan payments from the farming business. When discussing trade balance, it is important to remember that when we look at our trade deficit, the number can sometimes be misleading due to the method of accounting. For example, let's take a closer look at iPhone imports. The biggest U.S. import category from China is electronic machinery, which includes cell phones. The iPhone is a product designed by Apple in the U.S. but assembled in China. When the iPhone is shipped back to the U.S., it is recorded as a U.S. import as its factory cost. According to a 2018 Reuters report, the iPhone 7 imports contributed roughly $16 billion to the U.S. trade deficit with China in 2017. However, is this made in China iPhone really made by China? According to an IHS Markit article, the estimated factory cost of iPhone 7 was $237 when it was released in 2016. Believe it or not, only about $8.50 per phone is earned by China, for the battery supply and assembly. The rest of the value is earned by other countries. For example, the US and Japan each take a roughly $68 cut, and approximately $17 goes to South Korea. Therefore, importing an iPhone from China is equivalent to importing parts from many countries due to the global supply chain. If we recorded the import price of each iPhone 7 at $237 instead of $8.50, the US trade deficit with China is greatly overestimated. In summary, we can think of the trade deficit as a foreign investment in another country. The trade deficit can be good or bad, depending on whether the country uses the investment wisely. Also remember, the trade deficit value may be misleading due to the global supply chain and the accounting method used. In our final episode of this video series, we will follow Joe's continuing exploits in international trade on Mars. We will meet Joe's friend John, who is a supplier of memory chips. We will explore the question, why if trade between two countries is voluntary and fair, doesn't everyone equally benefit from trade? And we will also examine the issue of tariffs. Join us for episode 4, Winners and Losers of Trade. Thank you for watching this video. We look forward to you joining us for the next video in this series and hope that you will find this as a benefit personally and potentially in helping your business.